Okay, so yeah, in the previous share, we did the introduction regarding the blowing of the shofar, or rather the not blowing of the shofar on Shabbos, and the questions associated with that. How is it possible for such an important mitzvah, saseh d'oraisa, such an important positive commandment as enumerated in the Torah, to be overridden because of a concern that possibly those ignorant of the laws of Shabbos would transgress the laws of Shabbos. We then went on and asked questions about why Rosh Hashanah is on the 6th day of creation, which commemorates the creation of man, rather than the first day of creation, which would seem more appropriate. This is usually, when these questions are asked, it's usually associated with the Dibra Maschil of Zeh HaYom Techilas Masecha. This is the day, the beginning of your work. This is the beginning, this is the beginning of your work. The beginning of your work was on the 25th of Tishrei, Elul, not the 1st of Tishrei. We also asked, why in the Torah does it not elaborate at all how Rosh Hashanah is a day of judgment? And it's something that we only find in Torah Shabbat Peh. Merumas obviously hinted at in the Psukim, but nothing explicit in Torah Shabbat. We then brought two midrashim, which is really going to be the foundational guide of this hemshekh. You might think that the whole hemshekh is really a biur on these two midrashim. The first midrash we brought, something that's well known from Shaykhut Ve'emunah, that in the outset Hashem intended to create, and also from the first Rashi and the first pasuk in the Torah, the outset Hashem intended to create the world with din, as indicated by the pasuk Bereshis bara Elokim. Shem Elokim is associated with dinim, and in the end he saw that the world was not able to maintain itself, and therefore included midas harachamim, and that's indicated in the pasuk of B'yem Asay Savaya Likim Eretz V'Shamayim. So we asked if Hashem is Makar HaTeva Chesed, if Hashem is by nature good, and the nature of the person who's good is to do good, why would he want to create the world with sternness, with judgment, with strictness? It would seem more appropriate that Hashem would want to create the world with rachamim. And that is a question we're going to start examining in the third Maimah, the fourth Maimah, and the fifth Maimah. Why did Hashem want to create the world with Midas Hadin? What does it mean, Midas Hadin? Why would Hashem want to create the world with Midas Hadin? We then brought a second medrash, which is a moshel on the first medrash, of the moshel of a king with his fragile cups, and where he to put hot water in, they would crack; where to put cold water in, they would congeal and become filthy. And so he decided to mix the waters together so it should be lukewarm, or sort of not extreme hot and not extreme cold, and then with the hope that they would be okay. Similarly, when Hashem created the world, if he would have had too much midas hadin, then no one would have been able to cope with Hashem's level of strictness. And if he would have been too merciful, then it wouldn't have been possible. There would have been lots of sinners. Everyone would have thought there would be a free ride. Hashem will always forgive me. So either way, it wouldn't have worked. So in the end, he put them together in hopes that it would all work out. We already noted how the mashal of the original medrash is not so exact. There are certain differences. And those are things we're going to pick up a lot more when we learn it be'iyun. At the moment, we're just trying to read through, to remember, just to read through so we have some material to work with. You can spend hours introducing the hemshekh ranat, and you never learned the hemshekh ranat. So let's learn some of the hemshekh, especially the first two Maimarim, and then we'll have something to talk about, and we'll start to be able to appreciate the significance of this hemshekh, which is extremely significant. So, For the rest of this mimer and for the next mimer, the emphasis is going to be is trying to understand the moshul of kaisis. Of when it brings a moshul, it uses a term kais. What is this being meramas? What is being hinted at by saying by the medrash bringing a moshul of kaisis? Okay. Ubira moshulhu. So to explain this moshul, tini yadua, it's well known, the bechinas malchus nikra kais, that malchus is often referred to as a kais. So just the sort of the rudimentary components of a kais is what? It's a receptacle, right? What is the function of a kais? It is able to hold things, primarily liquid. You think of a kais, you think of liquid, right? Liquid, if it doesn't have a kais, what happens to it? It spills all over the place, right? So the cup is magbil. It contains something which would otherwise be mispashit without any, something that would spread without any containment. So that's the function of a kais. A kais also is the means by which you can drink. Yeah? So if you want to drink water, you can drink from a water fountain. That's one model. Take it directly from the source or some things. But you would say that in some ways the water fountain is itself like a replacement for the kais. And ordinarily, to drink liquid, you need a kais. So that is, I mean, if we're thinking what is a kais, if we're using it as a mashal, that is what a kais is. So malchus is itself nimshal a kais. So when we talk about malchus of Atzilus, we refer to it as a kais. So what would be the association with malchus and a kais? Malchus receives from the spheres from above it. Usually we say malchus leis lo migamar klum. Malchus itself is not a producer. Doesn't have its own identity. It is a recipient, and it functions as a container for the spheres elyonis. The 9 other spheres are nimshekh, are drawn down into malchus, and so as such, malchus is understandably referred to as a kais. Yeah? Shel nema, like it says in Tehillim, kais yistrois esa, a cup of salvation I will lift up. To David Amazal b'chinasei shehu b'chinas malchus. So David HaMelech, in the grander scheme of things, is also associated with malchus. He's a king, right? He's the symbol of sovereignty. So David is a king, and thanks. Shopping. So David said about himself that I will lift up this cup of salvation, and the cup of salvation was a self-reference. He is a kais, David's a kais, because Malchus is a kais. And similarly, that's where it's in all those places in the Zohar, it's referred to as such. B'sham b'Pashas Vayichi, and over there in Pashas Vayichi, Knesset Yisrael Nikra Keishal Bracha Chuli. So you look in the Zohar in Pashas Vayichi, Knesset Yisrael, which is also a madrega, so sort of the Knesset of Yisrael, the collective, Knesset Lashon collective, the sort of the congregation of Israel, as it's all congregated, it's all collected, is also called a Kais Shal Bracha, a cup of blessing. Over Meirei is Chav Sifchaf Aleph Kosav Kais Nikri Yisoid Du Nukva V'Lechein Kais Gematria Elikim. So we see there that the Kais is a particular darga in Malchus. So here it calls it Yisoid Nukva. So Malchus is also called an akeva. So we're going to go on to the mashal of why a woman is also called a kais, why a woman is considered to be a receptacle, and plays a significant part in this mashal. So in Malchus itself, which is called Nukva, the level of Yesod Nukva is called a Kais. Okay? And that's therefore why Kais is the Gematria Elikim. What's the Gematria of Elikim?
86, no?
Elikim is Mem Lamed 70, 86. Kais is Samach Chav Vav 86, right? Same Gematria. So Kais and Elikim, as we're going to see, Elikim is also associated with the level of Malchus.
What does it mean when it says Yesod Nukva?
I don't know. And for the purposes of this mimer, the emphasis, it's not something that's elaborated on. Yes, on the table. I think the reference over here is that it's associated with Malchus. It's called Yesod Nukva. Kais Yesod Nukva. So we see Kais and Nukva, Kais and Malchus are correlates. V'chein klolos ha-Malchus nikra Kais. So, the Me'irei wants to say it's Yesod Nukva, which is a particular darge in Malchus. But the Rebbe Rashab says, v'chein klolos ha-Malchus nikra Kais chuli. Just in general. And that's what he wants to bring out. He's bringing, a lot of times you'll find that in Chassidus, you get quotes, it brings sort of references, bring a raya from the Torah. I'm going to say something. So the raya is, you got a raya from the Zohar, a raya from here. So it's pretty clear that there's there's association between Kais and Malchus. So when we look at this, if we want to explain the moshel of the Medrash, which revolves around the concept of a Kais, what is the reference here to a Kais? So first of all, Kais is associated with Malchus. And here he goes and explains why. So it's not just expecting you to accept it on, the Kabbalah's Earl, that Kais is Malchus just because it says so in the Zohar. Explain, there's a reason why Kais and Malchus are associated. Just like a cup is a tool with which to receive in it wine or water, Malchus similarly serves a function of receiving all of the effusions and the revelations from the levels which precede it, which are above it. Yeah? And here, in order to explain that, he's going to give a mashal. Because we're talking about certain abstract things. Malchus is very abstract to us. So, kumay al derech mashal hadibur. And like, by way of example, dibur, speech. Hu hakli shaboinim shachim mislabshim keichas hanefesh seichel umidis chuli. Speech is a tool which is used to receive within it all of the abilities of the soul, be they intellectual or be they emotional. And as we're going to find out, broadly speaking, Dibur is associated with Malchus. When we talk about Hashem's Dibur, we're talking on the level of Malchus. So Malchus and Dibur are associated. We've already indicated, we've hinted at the idea of a woman is also connected. So these are going to be key to our stages of the mashal, of figuring out, of applying what it says here in the Medrash to various different scenarios. We want to understand Malchus a little bit better. We want to understand Dibur a little bit better. And we want to understand women a little bit better. And all of them are going to be instructive and helpful in gaining a broader picture. They're not all just the same thing in just another guise. Each one of those things has a different twist to the notion of a kli. But until now, until this stage, our concept of a kais is primarily that it's what? It's a receptacle. Yeah, its main function is it receives. Yeah, which is our basic understanding of a kais. So just like in human speech, which is a receptacle for the person's consciousness, be it intellectual or emotional, so too Malchus, which we refer to as Hashem speech, Dibra Elyon, is a receptacle for all of the hashpah, all of the various giluyim and revelations that come from the other 9 spheres. And that's why it's also called Knesset Yisrael.
So it says
Why Knesset Yisrael? Shehi Knesses b'seicha kol hagiluyim va'oros elyonim de bechinas Yisrael de la'ela. So the term Knesset Yisrael is associated with Malchus. Why? Because it's Knesset Yisrael. Yisrael is a reference to the spheres, the higher spheres, mainly Zoh. So Knesset Yisrael is the one that Knesset Yisrael, the one that contains and collects and receives all of the revelations of Yisrael. So we've got a lot of Kabbalistic terminology. Nukva, Knesset Yisrael, Dibur HaElyon. All of them, though, are referring to Malchus. This level of Malchus of Atzilus. And Umishum Zeh, Nikra Kais Gamkein. And it's for this very same reason it's called a Kais as well. Just like it's called Knesset Yisrael, Malchus, it's also called a Kais. So Kais is our term, but the main feature of Kais that is being translated into the level of Malchus is specifically its capacity to receive, to be a receptacle. Okay? B'zehu she'omar b'zoyha Knesset Yisrael nikra kais shabracha. So this is what it says in the Zohar, which we just quoted above a few lines earlier in Vayechi, that Knesset Yisrael, which we now know is the level of Malchus, which is able to contain with it the level of Yisrael, the spheres from above it, is called a kais shel bracha, a cup of blessing. Why? V'yadua. If now we've established that Malchus, which is called Knesset Yisrael, is also called a kais, we now understand why in the Zohar it says that Knesset Yisrael are called a kais shel bracha. So all of you can add up all the dots and they all create a supportive collective. V'yadu, and it's known, the Knesset Yisrael, when we refer to Knesset Yisrael, this level of Malchus, which we call Knesset Yisrael, what do we mean by it? Why do we call it Knesset Yisrael? Because it's the Sheirush U'Moker, the Neshamas Yisrael. It's the source of the Neshamas, of the Bnei Yisrael. The Lachen Kasiv, Havaya Menas Chelki V'Kaisi. And that's why it also says that Havaya, Hashem, is my portion and my cup. Why do we say that Hashem is my cup? The Koyal Pechinas Knesset Yisrael de Le'ela. We're referring, when we say that Hashem is my cup in Tehillim, we're meaning that we originate from this supernal level of Knesset Yisrael, of Malchus of Atzilus. Shehu Mekei Neshamas Yisrael, which is the source of the Yisrael. So we've brought a whole range of references from Psukim and Tilim, from the Zohar, of how this term Kais has a context. When the Medrash comes along and says there was a king who had Kaises, there's something behind that word which is more fulsome than just a random sort of moshel. And we're going to build on this idea of Kais. So our first port of call is to say that Kais is a reference to Malchus of Atzilus. When we learned the moshel, what did we say Kais was a reference to?
World.
To the world. In the moshel to the nimshel was the world. And here we're saying it's Malchus of Atzilus. And we know that the whole creation of the world funnels through, it becomes possible through Malchus of Atzilus. So if you're going to talk about the world, don't talk about the world necessarily, this continent, that continent, the physicality of this world. Go back to the origin. That is the world. That is where the world becomes viable. The world became viable in Malchus of Atzilus. But in the meantime, we've added on a whole load of things. We've got Dibur, we've got Isha, we've got Yisrael. The Mokken Neshamas Yisrael, right? The Mokken Neshamas Yisrael is Malchus of Atzilus. So Yisrael also has this component of being like a kais too. We refer to Hashem, he's our kais. This is our origin. The Zeu Inyan Kaisis Dakim. And this is the concept of fragile cups that was mentioned in the Medrash. The Ikka Kavona Bechinas Knesset Yisrael de La'ela Unashamis Yisrael de Lamata. The main reference, intention of this moshel of Kaisis Dakim is to the origin of Neshamas Yisrael, Knesset Yisrael de La'ela, Malchus of Atzilus, and to the product of Malchus of Atzilus, the product of Knesset Yisrael, the Neshamas Yisrael Lamata, to us. We are the cases. As we said, when the Medrash was talking, it was referring to what? The creation of the world in more general terms, not specifically to Malchus of Atzilus, and not specifically to the Neshamas Yisrael. The reason why that is the case is because the whole creation of the world is a product of Malchus, which is called a case. So therefore he calls the whole world a case. So the reference to case does refer to the world in all of it in its entirety, but most specifically and the main intention of it is Neshamas Yisrael.
Was that Rosh Hashanah?
Which one?
Who is he?
It's a commentary on the Zohar. Sefer Kabbalah. Okay? So that is sort of in a way another introduction, setting us up. We've taken Kos, and now we've understood it in sort of we've put it into the context in which we're going to think about it. What does it mean to be a kos? What is significant about kos? It's not just about what goes into the kos. It's not just about the midas hadin and midas harachamim. It's about the impact or the relevance it has to the thing it interacts with, which is the kos. So when Hashem says midas hadin, midas harachamim, he's talking about what is he going to be hemshekh into Malchus of Atzilus? What is he going to be hemshekh into Knesset Yisrael? Originally, he wanted to be mamshech into Malchus midas hadin. Saw the world was not able to survive, so he mixed together midas harachamim in order for the world to be functioning. What difference? What would be a world that would be created from a Malchus that was dominated by midas hadin? What would it be a world that was dominated by midas harachamim? More importantly, what would be, and the main intention is, what would be the case in Neshamas Yisrael? So let's first understand what is this kos in whatever. What is this kos referring to? What is the moshel of kos? What is it hint? What does it refer to? So ubira inyan. So to explain the concept as follows: to understand this concept, that what we've just said, that the Neshamas Yisrael, meaning us, and our origin, our source, our mocker, which is called Knesset Yisrael L'Mayla, which is in Malchus of Atzilus, is called a kos. So our inyan hu, the idea is as follows: Dina Yedua, it's known that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Knesset Yisrael, nikra b'shem chasen v'kala. The relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Knesset Yisrael. Now, specifically, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is usually a reference to Zoh of Atzilus, the spirits of Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Knesset Yisrael is Malchus. So the relationship between Zoh and Malchus is commonly referred to as the relationship between a Chasen and a Kala, a man and a woman, a bride and a groom. So it says in She'ashirim, on the day of his wedding, and in the Mishnah it says in this reference in She'ashirim is a reference to Matan Torah. Matan Torah was like the Chasna, was the wedding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Neshamas Yisrael, the Knesset Yisrael. And it's to be this is what is this relationship between, how do we understand the relationship of Zoh and Malchus? If we're going to call it a chasna and kala, you have to understand what is the relationship between a chasna and kala. It's a mashal. So what is the relationship between a chasna and kala? What is the relationship between a chasna and kala? And in the union and the sexual union of a man and a woman. What happens when a man marries a woman? They engage in sexual relations. What happens? She hemshekh tipa me'amoyach, that the male, the groom has semen, and that semen originates from his brain, which this is in rabbinic literature, we have the idea that the brain is the source of the semen, and it travels down the shidra, down the spine. But more generally, the hormones are produced through the operation of the brain, and a person is able to produce semen.
So scientifically, it's not that way. Scientifically, it's not so.
It's a variation of it. You don't have to be so exacting. It's not a yeah. But for our purposes, what is the we're not so much interested in the science of it. We're more interested in the fact that when the production of semen is a production of the potential for creation. And what do you create? You don't create something that is inanimate. You don't produce something that is deficient. It's the idea that you're able to convey the whole notion of a human being, including and most significantly their intellectual ability. So through this putrid piece of bodily fluid is able to convey the DNA, the possibilities of reproduction, reproducing a sentient human being, someone with consciousness, someone with intellect. So the father, or here in the case of the groom, is able to contribute and provide semen which is fully packed with the potential for human reproduction. Like it's well known, there's a major difference between the way in which a teacher is able to convey knowledge and intellect and understanding of things, which we would describe as a shefer ruchnius. When a teacher conveys ideas, he's conveying something which is intangible. Right? It's an idea. He's communicating an idea. The idea is intangible. And that's what we call a shefer ruchnius. That's a big difference between ubein hashbois hatipa shehi hashbois gashmis. But when someone shares semen, a drop of semen, that is physical. You're not conveying an idea, the concept of humanity, the concept of anushis, the concept of what it means to be a human being. You're conveying a piece of bodily fluid, something physical. It's ashpor gashmis. When you convey something conceptual, an idea, then you're really not conveying intellect, the very intellect itself. You're conveying what we call a ha'ara of it, something like a reflection of it, an impression of it. The teacher knows something. He understands something. He can't just take what he understands and implant it in the student's mind. He has to explain to him. He has to teach him or her and explain the idea. And it just becomes a reflection of the thing that he has. So he has something in himself, an intellectual idea which he understands. And he gives over an impression of it, what we call a ha'ara of it. But the student doesn't receive the teacher's intellect. V'haraya, what is the proof of that? The student doesn't all of a sudden immediately acquire the status of intellectual ability as the teacher. he remains the student. The Misha Eina Bal Meichin, Ba Seichel Be'etzem, somebody who themselves is not particularly intelligent, doesn't possess very sophisticated intellectual skills. Doesn't matter how much you're going to teach them, it's not going to help. They can't get it. There needs to be a student who has their own intellectual abilities, that they can process the information and then develop it. They could potentially, over time, develop and become greater than the teacher. But that moment, that teaching moment where the teacher teaches the student doesn't automatically acquire that knowledge. Like it's a known phrase, a kop kemenit aruf stellen. You can't pull down a head on someone's shoulders. If someone doesn't have a head, you can teach them from night bis morgen. You can teach them all day and night. Doesn't make a difference. They're not going to understand. The student has to previously have certain intellectual abilities. And were it to be the case, in fact, that when you do teach ideas, the ideas themselves, the intellectual idea is itself conveyed, and not just an impression of it, then the case would be that even were the student not to have any tremendous abilities, intellectual abilities, it would be a given, it would be necessary to say that the student should acquire that seichel. Rather, we are forced to say that the intellect itself is not conveyed, just an impression of that intellectual idea. So that's what we call a hashpa ruchnis. And one of the limitations of hashpa ruchnis. The limitations of hashpa ruchnis is you don't convey the essence of the idea, rather you just convey an impression of the idea. And so you're depending very much on the innate abilities of the student to be able to make something of it and utilize it. So that's not the case, but that's not the case when it comes to a physical transmission, in the case of what we're talking about, through sexual intercourse. When the man and woman engage in sexual intercourse and the man emits semen, then in that semen is contained the very essence of the man and the man's identity, his genetic makeup. And if they are blessed with to become pregnant, and the child is born like a proper human being, with intellect, with emotions, with all the functions of a human being. Hakol kashel hakol, all that there can be. It's a reproduction, as we call it. You reproduce the identity of the self through the sexual act. The son, the child that is born, is identical to the father. They have very similar genetic makeup and just in basic abilities. He has intellect, emotions, can walk, can talk, can move, can smell, can hear. Obviously there are cases when people are unwell.
So the man contributes the intellect. So what does the woman contribute?
Just wait.
Okay.
Wait for the punchline. V'hainu. Why is it the case? How is that possible? That through the production of the semen, it's not a ha'ara. The semen is not a ha'ara of the father. It's not a reflection of the father. It is a condensed form of the father. The father's genetic makeup is condensed into the semen, and therefore it's able to have that impact. And then from it, it's possible for there to be a whole new existence and creation, unlike in the hashpah ruchnis, unlike when the teacher is conveying an idea, you can't produce an intellectual student just by teaching them. They have to have certain faculties and abilities of themselves. Masha enkein, which is not the case in sexual intercourse and in reproduction. Va'adarabba, not only can the father reproduce himself through the production and the emission of semen in a woman, the child can achieve far greater things even than the father. The child can be even better than the father. It's not just a carbon copy. It's a reproduction of someone with all the abilities, that even with the ability to surpass the abilities of the original producer. Because when the father produces the semen, it's a condensation. It condenses every single aspect of him, even his most essential abilities. Sometimes even abilities which the father himself has not yet developed. Is all packaged into the drop of semen. So the father has abilities which he himself has not tapped into, but that also gets transmitted through the semen. That once you tap into those foundational, essential abilities of the soul, you can produce phenomenal, exultant things. Like was discussed at length in the Maimah Samach to Samach and in the Maimah V'hu K'chosim from Tafresh and Zayin. These are the Maimorim which the Rebbe Rashab said at the Chasna of the Frierdiker Rebbe, which was just over a year before the hemshekh of Ranat, in Elul Tafresh and Zayin. Now, this is the strange thing. You would think that something which is more profound would be more abstract. The more profound something is, the more detached, more abstract, the more uncontained it would be. But what do we see? That in order to convey essence, what is the medium with which to convey essence? Specifically through something which is physical. Unlike the teacher who wants to convey an idea, a lofty, something quite profound, even if he wants to convey the essence of an idea, he doesn't have the tools to really communicate that. There's nothing physical in which he can really convey that. But the essence of a person, you would think, if you can't do that through an idea, the essence of a person would be even more removed from potential transmission and conveyance. But instead, we find that specifically through the production of the physical semen, you're able to convey these essential qualities. Why? If you want to get to the very core of something, the essence of something, the only way it cannot be conveyed in an abstract, what we might call ruchnistic way, spiritual way. But don't think of it in spiritual sense. Think of it in something that is of the same ilk, meaning that giluyim. What are giluyim? What is ruchnis? Ruchnis is something. It's a reflection, just like we had in the mashal of conveying an idea. You're conveying. You're reflecting on something which you can't convey. So the very tools of communication, of sharing, of like giluyim, of is purposely it's acknowledging that it can't say what the thing is. If you want to talk about something, you want to refer to something, you want to reference something, you can talk about it. You can say it's like this, it looks like this, it's this size, but what it is, only it itself is it. doesn't we say kol etzem bilti miskala. The nature of something which is something essential is that it doesn't. It has no need to convey itself. It's got no insecurities that it needs to. What do other people think about me? Giluyim, revelations, is all about what other people think about me. It wants to. It's the very nature of a gilui is it wants to convey the meaning of something. Whereas the essence doesn't care what because it's essential. It's stable. It has its own identity. It is itself. And as soon as you enter into the realm of Giluyim, you enter into the realm of sort of this sort of sharing of something. It's not it. It will not be it. As soon as it's shared, it's not it. So what is the thing that is most oblivious to anything other than it? Is something physical. Something physical doesn't, and something pretty inanimate, even though a drop of semen is a living thing, but within the realm of, broadly speaking, these things, it doesn't have any, something physical is a sense of it has its own yeshus, it has its own identity, it has its own metzius. Its purpose in life is not to reflect something else, it just is itself. So if you want to convey essence, it has to be something of the same sort and the same order. So bizarrely, in a sense, the semen is a much more suitable means of communicating essence than would be the sharing of an idea, of the using your more sublime koiches, or your more abstract and ruchnistic koiches. It's specifically something physical, and we see this referred to in the Sefer Yetzirah, the Na'ud Tchilos and B'Seif and Davka, that the beginning is lodged in the end specifically. If you look in the hemshekh of Samach to Samach of Rishon and Zayin, it talks about this at length. So, and this is going to be a key feature of the Maimarim going forward. This idea that just because something in the usual hierarchy of things is placed at the bottom, such as the physical vis-a-vis the essential nature of the self, it's specifically what is most secondary and peripheral seemingly in the hierarchy of things that is the main means of communication. Okay? So that is the difference between hashpah ruchnius and hashpah gashmius. All seemed good till now, but that doesn't help us with our moshel of kais. In the moshel of kais, we said we want to understand, we refer to chassan and kala. As far as I know, chsanim, just by producing semen, men by producing semen cannot reproduce children. There has to be a woman involved, right? There has to be a kala, there has to be the mother of the child, not just the father. So what role does she play? However, me'ashpos hatipa atzma lo yeh mizah ha'ilada. Just by emitting semen, you're not going to reproduce. There won't be any new children from the ejaculation of semen. Ki im hemshekh mislabeshes berechem hanukva v'keilates hatipa. It's only when the semen is contained within the womb of the female and she holds on to it. Then it is possible for there to be reproduction of a child that will be comparable to the father. And it's on this that it says in the Gemara in Nida, that a woman was given a greater measure of bina than a man. Meaning that specifically in her was given this ability, this power to reproduce children, reproduce human beings. That through the semen staying in the womb of the woman, Yiyah hishabes havlad b'binyan shalim, there will be the reproduction and the creation of a child in a full and healthy way, beramach everim v'shsagidim, 248 limbs and 365 sinews, and all of the human qualities of intellect, emotions, etc. This quality was not given to a man. A man does not have the ability to produce children. Women are given the ability to produce children. And this is what the Gemara means when it says Bina Yaseirin Nabisha. Woman was given greater levels of Bina. Bina is as we're going to see, is why specifically Bina. We'll discuss soon. But briefly, just like in Chachma and Bina, Chachma is just seen as a seminal point of an idea, and Bina is the elaboration, the expansion, and the development of the idea. Similarly, too, in the sexual union, the man just provides a drop of semen, but it's the woman who elaborates and expands upon it and produces the child.
So, if the man comes from Chachma, surely he should also have a Chachma Yisera. If we say that woman needs a Bin Yisera over man, and because of that she has a special attribute, then surely a man needs a Chachma
No, she's
Yisera.
also from Chachma. He's also everyone who's created in their nefesh has all esakechas, like we see in Tanya, right?
She has a Bin Yisera.
She has Bin Yisera.
No?
So she can do something extraordinary and reproduce a child. That's a novelty.
Why do we need a man bechal then?
Good question. And he's going to deal with it in the second Maimon. But you understand where we're coming from. Originally, we were thinking
the man was running the show.
The ram was right. Everything's about the man. Now, that's just from a few lines you already said, well, what do you need a man for? Just like he can't produce a child by himself, she also can't produce a child by herself. But you're already seeing the primary power of recreation, procreation, is a female quality. Is in a woman, in a kois. So a kois is not merely a recipient, a receptacle. Till now we were just talking about a kois as it had the power of receiving. So a woman receives the semen from the man. Shkoyach. She does more than that though. In her role as a kois, she's not just a receptacle. She's a catalyst. She turns something into something else. She recreates a human being. Right? So the word kois now has expanded the moshel of kois is now a broader moshel. If you just think of kois like a cup of water, then you just think of it as a receptacle. If you think of it just as, or the way we describe malchus, what does malchus do? It just receives all of the keiches shlamayla mimena. But through the moshel of Isha, you recognize that the power of a kois is much more than that. A kois has the power to transform something. Not just receive it, transform it. It's a transformative element. So let's just finish the paragraph. Even though in the semen of the father is incorporates within it the power of creation, has a procreative quality to it, ukanal, like we just explained above. Mikol mokim, but nevertheless, ein bezeh shum hevi chadasha. From this alone will come nothing out of it at all. There will be no new creation. Kim davka al yidei nukva. It's specifically through the nukva that procreation is possible. Du bekoicha davka, that it's her koyach specifically, not his koyach, her koyach. Nases havas avlad, the creation of the child is possible, it's made possible, as an absolute and entirely new human being. And this is this additional quality of bina that a woman has. She has an additional ability, additional over and above the man, to create a new entity, which the man alone does not have. Okay?